Today we have something pretty cool from the ever prominent Ducky. This is the Ducky One 711 limited edition mechanical keyboard, which is limited at 1999 units. And since this is a Ducky One at its core, this will also reflect my thoughts on that, although there will be some differences in the contents and product. Opening up the box, we have the user manual, the keyboard itself with an always welcome dust cover, we have an extra spacebar, and some stuff from one of their new brands hardcap with a wire keycap puller and some extra keycaps, and then we have the micro USB cable. Okay, so the name. First off, this is a Ducky One keyboard, but the 711 edition refers to it having 7 different LED colors and then 11 different key switch types. Understandably, they've gone with a full-size keyboard plus the 4 keys in the top right hand corner, giving us 108 keys. The Ducky One has a pretty simplistic look to it, rather than the a bit more out there Ducky Shine series, so I quite like the looks of the 1 series boards. It has a simple round rectangular shape with a chamfer all the way around. The black plastic has a smooth satin finish to it, but to me doesn't feel the best in comparison to other similar boards. I'm not sure, but it might be the texture or something that doesn't really accentuate quality. On the rear we have the 711 branding, which is nice to see. And with the side profile we can see that they have a somewhat slim design in that it's not just a flat side, and then we have the standard OEM profile keycaps. On the bottom we have 4 rubber feet with some flip up feet that are also rubber tipped, and there's 2 on each side for differing angles, which is great to have, and there's the cable routing channel on the top. We also have our dip switches, so the first 3 just change the position of the function key along the bottom row, and with dip 4 you can choose between end key rollover and 6 key rollover. And finally we have the metal info plate, which I always like with Ducky keyboards. With this edition, like many of Ducky's keyboards, we get 2 spacebars, so we have the normal one that we saw earlier, but then we have this sweet 711 edition spacebar. However, because of its much more complicated design and the fact that they need it to be shine through compatible, this is ABS plastic but is UV coated and then laser etched. This is different to the other keycaps as the rest are also ABS but are double shot, so the translucent legends are another piece of plastic, so they'll never fade away. The hard caps that were included are pretty interesting. We have an escape, backspace, 2 enter keys with 1 for the number pad, and some arrow keys, although the arrow keys are for the WASD keys. These are made from PBT plastic and are double shot but are not backlit and are actually thinner than the stock keycaps. But my backspace keycap and my numpad enter keycap aren't great in terms of fit. You really have to force them onto the keys and stabilizers, which also results them in being really tough to take off. I also tried them on other keyboards and it was the same case, so something is a little off even though by eye they look completely fine. So yeah, that's not a great sign, but then again it is a new brand. Alright, so now to the key switches. As said before, there are 11 different Cherry MX key switches in different zones of the keyboard. Starting with the main area, we have MX silvers, also known as speed silvers for the bass. I actually wanted a keyboard with silvers to go in depth about it, but they gave me this keyboard instead. And these are essentially reds being linear, meaning that there is no tactile bump or click, and they also have a 45 gram actuation force. The only difference is that the pre-travel is 1.2mm instead of having the normal 2mm, and the overall travel is 3.4mm rather than the normal 4mm. So technically it'll be faster, but to what degree I'm not so sure. For the mods, including the spacebar, we have the MX reds that we just compared the silvers to. On the arrow keys we have the MX browns, which are light tactile switches, meaning that they have a bump halfway but no click. Above those we have the MX silent reds or pinks, and these are just like the reds but have dampening tabs in the switch to dampen the sound, creating a quieter and also softer switch. I've done a full video on these so you can check it out if you want. And above those are the MX silent blacks, which are the same but heavier. To the right we have some MX greens, which are clicky switches and are the heavier version of the classic MX blues, which populate the whole numpad. To the function row now, and we have some MX clears. These are like the browns in that they are tactile but are heavier and in turn more tactile and more satisfying to use. Then we have the classic MX blacks, so again just the heavy version of the reds. And then we have the MX whites, probably one of the more interesting key switches on here, especially to me since I actually haven't tried them before, It's quite an odd switch as it's clicky, but it's hardly clicky at all and also hardly tactile at all. And finally, in the top left we have a single MX tactile grey on the escape key, and this is yet another tactile key switch but is even heavier than the clears. So yeah, a solid selection there. It pretty much has most of the current ones covered. It's nice to get a feel of the less common switches, which all seem to just be the heavier versions of the very common 4 that is distributed and marketed the most. Many of the enthusiast community do prefer heavier weights, and it can bring about more tactility, which is highly desired. It only comes in this configuration, so we're pretty much looking at a linear keyboard here, with the reds and silvers being very similar in feel and covering most of the keys that you will actually use. So we don't get much of the less common switches and not many useful tactile switches. So those are the 11 key switch types, and then the 7 refers to the 7 different LED colors. And well, yeah, this is what it is. Personally, not my thing, as I really don't like multiple fixed color lighting, but it's a special trait of the keyboard. There are also lighting effects and all that you can do, and you can also customize lighting profiles to choose what's on or off and all that as per usual. The Ducky One also has macro capabilities. There is the default profile, and then we have 5 other profiles that we can customize, and these are stored on the 1 to 6 keys via the FN key. Each profile has 2 layers, with the default layer and the secondary FN layer. We can customize most keys except for these keys here, which are on the function layer, and we can set keys to be a multimedia function, a different key, or a macro output. And we can also emulate mouse movements on the number pad, which I've never really done. One last thing I like is the 4 extra keys in the top right corner. It just fills up what is otherwise wasted space with some useful primary volume control keys and a dedicated calculator key. Taking the keyboard apart is done by removing some screws and wedging something in between the 2 pieces of plastic and then releasing the clips. It's always an annoying process, but yeah, this will void your warranty. Here's the top plastic shell, and it's pretty flimsy because of how low profile it is. And yeah, it doesn't feel great because of this with a heap of flex, but it doesn't really matter once it's secured. The bottom plastic shell also doesn't give me the best impressions. It just doesn't feel as good as other similar keyboards. There's no ribbing on the bottom surface for reinforcement, but there's this big indent that houses the feet that makes it stronger. The plastic cable holder already has a bit of a crack in it, and this is just like on the IKBC MF108 I recently checked out, so it's a good idea to put some hot glue there, but again, opening up the keyboard will void your warranty. The solid steel plate is 1.5mm thick and is bent at the front and back, giving it no flex, and this is pretty much what gives the keyboard all its weight and that traditional mechanical keyboard feel. And attached to that is the PCB, which looks clean and fine to me. We do have through-hole LEDs instead of the very common SMD LEDs, but yeah, nothing much of note back here. So overall, it's another Ducky One, but with a few twists. Ducky has been making mechanical keyboards for years, and they haven't strayed too far from what has made them successful. They've kept it relatively simple in terms of design and how it looks with a simple rectangular shape. They stuck with the Cherry MX key switches, and we get quite a selection here, and the build is the typical internal steel plate with a plastic enclosure. Its actual use case and functionality of having different key switches in this configuration isn't really what matters in my opinion. It's more of a novelty thing, but I enjoy it anyway. And if you ever have someone come over, you can let them try out all the different key switch types on the actual keyboard. But other than that, it's just another solid keyboard from Ducky, as they've been doing for years. And it's yet another limited edition keyboard that they've released to add to their catalogue, which I do enjoy seeing, and I look forward to future special edition keyboards from Ducky.